So today I want to talk with you about the joint by joint approach and how it relates with pain, how pain develops, how dysfunction develops, and why when you come in and say, Dr. Matt, my back hurts when I run, I say, okay, let's make sure we take a look at the feet. Now, if you've never heard of the joint by joint approach before, it's an idea that was developed by Gray Cook, who's a physical therapist, and Mike Boyle, who's a strength coach. And the idea is that all of our joints fall into one of two categories, either stable or mobile, and by default, that's where they should be. It's all based on the amount of motion they're freely capable of at each level. Now, if we think about motion, we generally think of it as forward and back, side to side, and rotation. And so stable joints generally move well and freely in one of those planes and then have a little bit of ability in other planes. Mobile joints generally have more than one plane that they can freely move in. And so if we look in the body, starting at the bottom and working up, we have our toes, which should be mobile. They should be able to wiggle around quite a bit. And we get into the foot, and that should be pretty stable. You're in an arched position, flattens out as you hit the ground when you're walking or running, and then rebounds right back, doing a lot of shock absorption. Then we get into the ankle, and that should be a pretty mobile joint. It's a pseudo ball and socket joint. It should be able to move pretty freely. Now, one thing that I hear a lot is, Dr. Matt, I have hypermobile ankles. My ankles sprain all the time. Well, realistically, if you have hypermobile ankles, you're not likely to be spraining them that often. If you can move your ankles really well, the ligaments are not going to be at risk. You're going to be able to move healthily. So oftentimes it's more stable or hypomobile joints that lead to recurrent ankle sprains. Following up the chain, we have the knee, which should be pretty stable. It moves forward and back, and then a little bit of rotation side to side. And we get to the hip, which is a ball and socket joint, one of the most mobile joints in the body. Moving up from there, we get into the lumbopelvic region. That should be pretty stable. Excess mobility in this area is one of the primary causes of different types of low back injuries. Strains and sprains, muscle spasms, sometimes even disc herniations can be a result of poor biomechanics or dysfunction in mobility or stability in that area. Moving up from there, we have our thoracic spine, which should be pretty mobile. Our scapular, humeral, scapulothoracic, both of those should be pretty stable. The shoulder blade should move along the rib cage when you move your shoulder. It shouldn't wing out. It shouldn't be excess protraction. It should be pretty stable in a fixed pathway. Then going up from there, we have the shoulder, the glenohumeral joint. Again, one of the most mobile joints in the body, should be very mobile. Going up, we have the lower neck, which should be pretty stable. It's holding our bowling ball attached to the rest of our body. Should be able to be pretty stable there. And then we get into the upper neck, and most of our motion in our neck actually comes from those first two vertebrae. And so we should have quite a bit of rotation, lateral bending going on in that area there. Coming back down to the shoulder and working out, we have a very similar pathway, symmetrical even for the upper extremity and the lower extremity. So stable elbows, mobile wrists, stable hands, mobile fingers. The hand is this area here. There's not a whole lot of motion in the hand, but the fingers and the wrist should be free to move quite a bit. Now, one thing I want to make sure that we address is that stable and stiff are two different things. So stable is the ability to resist excess load, to not be pushed into directions that are not ideal for it. Stiff is locked into place. And so oftentimes we'll have stiff hips, stiff knees, stiff feet, just because we haven't worked those muscles in a way that is suitable for them. And so we want to distinguish stiff versus stable. In an ideal system, we have stability, not stiffness. So one of the most common things that we'll see in the clinic is people who come in who have dysfunction, imbalance in the lower extremity. If one of the most common areas is the foot. So if we lose stability at the foot, we have excess mobility. Let's say you're running in orthotics and you've never really done a whole lot of barefoot integration work. You're not really doing anything to strengthen the small intrinsic muscles of the feet. Well, cool. These are probably going to be pretty mobile, which means that up the chain, you need to have stability somewhere. You're likely going to get it at the next joint up, the ankle. So this ankle that should be pretty mobile stabilizes or stiffens. Then we see that go up the chain into the rest of the body here. Knees might get a little bit extra mobile, a little bit of pain on the IT band insertion. Hips might get a little stiff. Hip flexors might be a little cranky. Glutes might be a little cranky. And so we go with the root cause first. And so if you're walking 10,000 steps a day, if we address the hip first, that might be great for the hip, but we're still going to be compensating at the foot the entire time. Similarly, in the upper extremity, we deal with issues in the wrist and the hand and the elbow. If we're dealing with issues and we address issues there, but we don't address the root cause in the shoulder blade and in the thoracic spine, we're going to be running into a wall as well. So we want to make sure that we're addressing the root issue. If you are someone who has been dealing with pain and dysfunction, especially with activity, and you find that treatments are relieving, but only for a short period of time, the exercises and stretches that you're doing are only really acting as a Band-Aid, helping you push through to the next time that you need to do what you need to do, potentially there's a functional imbalance issue that needs to be addressed. So give us a call, come on in, let's get an assessment in and see, are we dealing with issues of imbalance at the feet, at the shoulder blade, in the neck, or is your low back pain really just low back pain?